Welcome everybody to In Darkness the Light Still Shines. I'm Barry Feaker, Executive Director of the Topeka Rescue Mission and Freedom Now USA.
And I'm Jessica Hossman. I'm the Senior Director of Trauma-Based Initiatives and the Children's Palace at the Topeka Rescue Mission.
We're so glad you've joined us. What we're doing is that we're talking about stories of people who have got great challenges in life, which are all of us, as well as the hope that we find in life to be able to overcome those challenges. What we have is a book called In Darkness the Light Still Shines. It was written over a period of 26 years of stories that I experienced as director of the Topeka Rescue Mission. And each week, what we are going to do is take one of those stories and be able to unpack that. This week, what we're going to be talking about is Chapter 6. The title of that is Cooking with Umbrellas. So today, what we have at Topeka Rescue Mission is far different than we experienced in 1986 when I first came to the rescue mission. We had an old building. It was on North Kansas Avenue where a parking lot is now, and basically just a handful of homeless folks. And me as a young, inexperienced director, knowing that we needed to feed about 50 people a night and shelter maybe 20 or 15 to 20 people a night as well. We had this little tiny kitchen in this old rescue mission building, and it was simply bare bones. But people were hungry and we needed to do what we needed to do. It was very small, it was hot in the summer, and it was cold in the winter. My first winter there, we had a heavy snow. And on top of the roof, there was a big snowpack. And one thing that I didn't realize is how leaky that old roof was. Until one day, we turned on the stoves to cook the food, and it heated up the kitchen so much that the snow began to melt. And as the snow began to melt, it began to rain. And so we were going to ruin all the food in the kitchen if we didn't do something quickly. And so what the guys did is we got some umbrellas. And if you can imagine, some of the homeless folks who were cooking the food were standing there cooking hamburgers with umbrellas. It was raining in on the kitchen there. Well, there's so much snow that year that every time we cooked, it would rain in the kitchen. Now, water was building up all over the floor. And so people say, well, why didn't you fix the roof? Well, one of the things that we didn't have was any money. And so if we didn't have any money, we didn't have a way to fix the roof. And so we just did what we could. And so as the water built up on the floor, we had nowhere for it to run. And so we got an old drill, not an electric drill, but we had one of those old 1920s hand drill, and we put it down on the floor and drilled about 20 holes, and that water ran down into the basement and filled the basement up, of course, with great fresh snow water. But we got through it. And we were able to serve people food in a hygienic way as possible. Things aren't like that today. We have a wonderful kitchen and we're licensed and we have all kinds of wonderful things. But things don't always start out that way. Sometimes they start out with very meager means. The question is, are we going to quit? Are we going to give up? Are we going to persevere for the sake of ourselves of what we can learn? Or are we going to persevere on behalf of others who depend upon us? So whatever situation that you may be facing today in Darkness a Light Still Shines, we're going to talk about those hard times in life. We're going to talk about those times when we want to run, when we want to quit, and we all face them, and how we can learn to persevere with God's help and with standing with each other to see light in the midst of our darkness. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This production is hosted by Topeka Rescue Mission Ministries, bringing help and hope through faith with its sleeves rolled up. If you would like to support Topeka Rescue Mission Ministries, text TRM Give to 77977 and start giving today.
Welcome back to In Darkness the Light Still Shines. We just talked about this story, Jessica, that happened about 33 years ago when I was brand new here at the rescue mission, and we were trying to find a way to feed people and do it with a roof that was leaking.
Right.
Right in on the stove, the food, snow had built up on that roof. You turn on the stove and it gets hot in the kitchen, and then it melts and it turns into rain. And so rather than saying, sorry, we have no food for you, we could have done that legitimately. Mm-hmm. And probably some people say you were not very smart to not do that.
Right.
We decided that we had to press on. Mm-hmm. And so how do you press on? Well, some guys had an idea, let's come up with some umbrellas. And so they put these umbrellas up, and it was a crazy scene to see them frying the hamburgers and having these umbrellas and rain running off of the umbrellas with this leaky roof and running all over the floor. And now we got a problem because people are wading around in water,
Right.
and that wasn't very safe, hygienic at all. And it was old rescue mission style days. We
Sure.
wouldn't even think about doing
Right.
that today. We would probably ask donors to give us gift certificates to Taco Tica or something. But we didn't have any resources.
Yeah.
We didn't really have hardly any donors.
Mhm.
We had our backs up against a wall. And it was one of those things that we all face in life,
Right.
is that this doesn't feel good, this
Right.
doesn't look good,
Right.
but yet we need to do something.
Right.
Either we walk away or we persevere.
Right.
And so I'm so glad we persevered because we got to write about it in this book.
Right.
And it was comical, but at the same time, it was very meaningful to people to see
Sure.
that we were going to stick it out.
Sure. And this is one of those stories that it's so hard to believe
Yeah.
the scenario. I mean, you think about it and it's like a movie, a comedy that
Was.
somebody would come up with because there's so many different bizarre details to
Mhm,
it.
mhm.
And I remember the first time that I heard you share this story, that was what was going through my mind. Like, he's
Can this
got to
really be
be
real?
he's got to be exaggerating. Like, this didn't really go down this way.
Mhm.
So when you were standing in the kitchen for the very first time and
Mhm.
this scene is getting played out before you,
Mhm.
what was going through your mind?
By that time, I had come in April of
Uh-huh.
that year, and now it's probably in early 1987 is when it was, when we had a heavy snow that winter.
Mhm.
And, by that time, I was kind of used to
Okay.
every single day
Yeah.
something not working. There
Mhm.
wasn't air conditioning. There were people coming in off the streets. I was new to working with the homeless.
Yeah.
I was seeing things that I didn't know existed in
Mhm.
the United States.
Sure.
I was seeing alcoholism, mental illness. I had
Right.
worked with the mentally ill before, but I'd never seen the devastation. I'd seen people hadn't eaten in maybe 2 weeks,
Wow.
other than maybe what they could find in a garbage can,
Mhm.
and they were skin and bones. And so you get to that place of, and back in those days, putting in 18, sometimes 20 hours a day just to keep the place going. And so by that time I was kind of seasoned. And so seeing the umbrellas was just another thing we got to do,
Wow.
and it was kind of comical as I stepped back from it, but I just really felt like that we have to keep pressing on.
Right.
And life is like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pressing on.
Yeah. And we never know the strength that God can equip us with until we find ourselves in those situations.
Exactly.
I can imagine that prior to you taking on the job of the rescue mission, if somebody would have told you, Barry, in just a couple months, you're going to be standing in the middle of a kitchen and the staff or the guests of the rescue mission that live there and are not even staff are going to be cooking food
Mhm.
while they're holding umbrellas, because that's how challenging the situation is going to be. Just a piece of it, because there was other challenges going on, I'm sure, at the same time.
Mhm.
Kitchen was just a piece of it.
Yep.
You probably would have thought, that's insane. There's no way that I can take this on.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that I can figure out something like that on top of everything else that I have to figure out. So when you found yourself in that situation and you've got the kitchen drama going on, and then
Mhm.
you've got, I mean, a ton of stories
Mhm.
that are recorded in here. A lot of those happened right in your beginning
They
years.
sure did.
And so there's a guy with a gun.
Mhm.
There are individuals who are literally dying inside
Mhm.
the rescue mission, sick beyond words, both physically and
Mhm.
mentally. You've got angry people that are struggling with rage and addiction. So you've got all this going on at once. Why didn't you quit?
That's a good question. The first part of what you were talking about there is if I'd have known about it beforehand, I
Mhm.
probably wouldn't have done it.
Right.
And I think there's so many times in life that we get ourselves in a situation and we always say, man, I sure wish I knew this was coming.
Sure.
But if we had a choice to go forward and we knew something was coming, we'd probably go the other way. And so
Right.
I was really glad that I didn't know what was ahead of me
Sure.
after a while.
Sure.
I mean, there were times that I was saying, man, I sure wish this wasn't happening, or
Right.
I don't know, have a solution here.
Right.
In my situation, what kept me going though was that I was very, very serious about finding what God wanted me to do with my life. I
Mhm.
mean, probably as serious as I've ever been about anything
Right.
before. And I think that that was kind of a marker point in my life,
Mhm.
is to say, God, I've got unknown amount of time on the earth.
Right.
You've really blessed me. Came from a good family, had some really good experiences. I was able to go to college and those kind of things.
Mhm.
But now it's getting serious.
Right.
Young adult, getting serious, deciding, what do I want to do with my life? So I just
Right.
had this simple prayer. God, I don't want to just hear about you. I don't want to just read about you or somebody else's story. I don't want it to be a 2,000-year-old story or a 5,000-year-old story. I want it to be, where are you in the earth today?
Right.
And so I remember after I'd been at the mission a while, I go, wow, he answered that prayer. He put me where he is today.
Right.
And so that was what was keeping me going because, okay, if you put me in this place that I probably would have said no to if you'd have told me in advance, and I don't like it, I'm not comfortable. This isn't fun.
Right.
This is not what I would have, my nature is probably like a lot of our natures, is to go the easy route.
Right.
To have life as it would be just kind of on a cruise ship, as we say,
Right.
versus a battleship.
Right.
But at the same time, there was a hunger there that I couldn't get rid of, that I wanted to see God in action. I wanted to see him in people. I wanted to not have somebody else's testimony be one that I lived on. I wanted to live on my own. Right. And so as I was looking at those situations, I was crying out to the Lord, saying, Lord, where are you in this?
Right.
And I felt like the Lord in that situation said, umbrellas, we have umbrellas for you to use. Now, was all it was going to be ever? I believe no. There was going to be a better day ahead.
Right.
And I think so what kept me going was believing there was going to be a better day. And then also looking out at the people who were looking at me who really had no other options.
Right.
And so oftentimes I felt like my back is up against a wall with nowhere to turn. Yeah. I think about the children of Israel in the Bible who had left Egypt and they were led out into the desert and they're standing in front of a Red Sea. And Pharaoh and his army were coming after them. And they were about to die. And they were crying out and saying, Moses, why did you bring us out here into the desert so that we could die here? I mean, they'd already seen a lot of miracles before this, but they really felt like they were going to die. Right. Yet there had to be somebody who believed God. Who believed God that there was going to be a solution here. Right. God spoke to Moses and he spoke to the people and God told them, don't be afraid, be still, for the Lord is about to do something pretty spectacular here. Absolutely. And so believing that and knowing that was somebody else's experience, I said, God, can you make that my experience? Right. And it's no Red Sea, it was water coming through a roof, it was hamburgers and it was umbrellas. But it was as big a deal to me as a whole army coming after me because I felt responsible.
Absolutely. And I really believe it doesn't matter if it's a big crisis that the world would perceive as big, like being in the front of a Red Sea and having an army chasing you or the opportunity to drown, and it looks like the end result is going to be disastrous either way, something huge like that, or if it's something that the world may say is little or insignificant, God doesn't see any of it that way. Right. He looks at the situation with the umbrellas the same way as he was looking at that Red Sea for Moses and the people. And it takes somebody who's willing to stop and listen and hear from the Lord, Lord, what are you telling me to do? He told Moses, go forward. I know it doesn't make sense. I know it looks like if you move forward, you're going to drown and you're going to die. But trust me, listen to me and do what I say, and it's going to work out. I'm sure Moses had no idea how it was going to work out.
Correct, he didn't.
I'm sure that he thought he was doomed, and he thought that he was going to lead his people to their death. But he was still. He did stop. He did listen. And when he moved forward, it's a victory that's still going on today, that we still are getting to live in that victory because of Moses' obedience. So 33 years ago, is that how long ago you came to the mission? So 33 years ago, you personally said, yes, I want to experience you. I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm sure there's been probably more occasions than what you can account that you thought, if I do this, Lord, surely I'm going to die. Surely the ministry is going to die. Surely the people that I'm responsible for, that you've placed under my care, are going to die. But even though it doesn't make sense, I'm going to choose to trust you. And I think that's something that all of us encounter at different times throughout our life. And it's so comforting to know that nothing is insignificant to God.
Mhm.
Like nothing is too small for him to pay attention to.
Mhm.
Like people might be watching this and think, gosh, my problem is so small in comparison to this little thing, or gosh, I have this burden on my heart to do this little thing, but in the scheme of the whole world, that seems so insignificant. But it starts with one yes.
Mhm.
And that one yes, regardless of how small somebody might perceive it to be, can really alter and change
Absolutely.
an army of people.
Really can. And the lesson we learn personally is there's no way you can value that lesson because it's beyond any kind of value.
Right.
It's great. Moses, going back to him, he wasn't exactly the most willing guy to step into this role. It was one of those things where he felt a calling.
Right.
But yet he didn't want to. He even argued with God. He said, I'm not your guy.
Right.
And God said, yeah, you are. And I think that's a lot of times where we are, is that we really don't feel like we're worthy. We don't feel like that we're trained enough, we're
Right.
equipped enough. And I wasn't, I'm not worthy before God, a holy
Right.
God. I'm not. But he makes me that way.
Right.
Because he's decided to make me that way. And when I talk to people now after all these years, they're, especially young men who are very excited about what God may do with their life. And then when we talk about being a foreign missionary or going to the inner city or doing something, a lot of times they go, well, I can't do that.
Right.
I always say, how do you know?
Right.
How do you know? No, you can't do it successfully if you're not called to do it. But if you are called to do it, yeah, you can do it successfully. Is that going to be smooth? Is everything going to work out? And, all the money's going to be there and everything's going to work out in your life? No, I know of some missionary folks that are around the world who've done some phenomenal things to touch amazing people, and they get malaria, or there's a death of a child, or there's a other health issue, or the funds aren't there. They have to leave a country, and they question God. And they say, God, where were you in all of that?
Right.
And I have done that so many times.
Sure.
One of the things that, even though this book talks about some amazing stories, there's no hero here. The hero is God.
Right.
The hero is the people that God sends around to stand with us in these challenging times. The hero is the people that God pulls together in these stories. And so all we are asked to do is just really stand there with people. When we come back, I would like for you to talk about a very uncomfortable place that you shared before about being sent to Africa and what that was like, and really the challenges that you felt and what you did in the midst of those challenges. So we'll be right back with In Darkness a Light Still Shines, and we're going to talk about a situation that Jessica faced when she was over in Mozambique, Africa, not once, not twice, but more times, and really what it's like to be on that calling and face those challenging times, to be able to say, God, I'm here, and see how God enables us to persevere. We'll be right back.
Thank you to Furniture Mall of Kansas for sponsoring the In Darkness a Light Still Shines video podcast. We appreciate your support.
Welcome back to In Darkness, the Light Still Shines. We have just been talking about perseverance. And we were talking about this story out of In Darkness, the Light Still Shines in chapter 6, to where we were actually cooking in a building where it was raining in the building, and we had to use umbrellas because the snow was melting and coming down. And we're just talking about those experiences that I've had over a number of years of, why have I stayed in this work with all the challenges that it provides for us. And Jessica, I know that about 10 years ago when I first met you, I got to know that you had done missionary work in Africa, in particular Mozambique. And during your time here at the Rescue Mission, you made a third journey into Mozambique. And as I recall, when you got back, I remember sitting down with you and I said, what'd you learn? And you had this blank stare on your face. It was like, oh my goodness, what do I say? And I knew that it had been a rough experience. They were in a drought, if I recall right. There was civil war going on. There were people who were dying. As I recall, there were people actually diving into a river because of the drought to be able to go to the bottom of the river and to get some type of vegetation to be able to eat it. And there were some people that died from alligator attacks. And you were over there with your son. And so talk to us about that experience and what you learned and how it influenced something pretty significant today.
Sure. So my heart has always been since I've been a believer, Lord, wherever you tell me to go, I'm going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want me to go to Topeka and work at a rescue
Probably your
mission,
biggest one yet, right?
I'm going to do it. It's a little similar to Africa, I found, after moving from Pennsylvania. A little bit of a different culture. So the very first time I went to Africa, I really didn't know, I didn't intentionally go to Africa. I had been doing street outreach in a city, urban environment, and felt like I wanted to see and go and help somewhere where there was a bigger need than where I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so I was thinking Skid Row, I was thinking Harlem, I was thinking different places like that. And because of the time I could take off from work at that time and the opportunities that were available, I landed on a short-term trip to South Africa. Well, that was quite an experience, but it was there that I felt like the Lord said, this is what I'm calling you to. I'm calling you to long-term missions. So I cried and wept and told God no, like you were sharing before. Like, we just don't feel worthy. That's such a huge calling. And I thought, no way, I'm so imperfect. I'm not holy enough. I don't know enough. But when I gave God my yes, then my heart was in it. And in my mind, okay, let's do this. Let's just move to Africa. Let's just not even go back ever
You'll stay
to
there
America.
forever.
Let's just stay
Let's go.
and do this. Well, that wasn't God's plan either. So when I went back to Africa, this time it was with a different ministry, and I'm in Mozambique. And the first day was glorious. Everything's wonderful. It's a dream come true.
Sometimes God gives us that kind of honeymoon experience before He shows us the real deal.
Yes, I'm in the bush. The whole group of kiddos staying on the base, they greet me at this little airport. We walk to the base. It's glorious. We're worshiping Jesus in this hut, and I'm thanking the Lord. Thank you, Father. And then around 5:30 at night, the sun goes down and everything's pitch black because where I was at that time, there's no electricity, there's no running water. And so at 5:30, it's dark.
Really dark.
So we all get our little candles that are in a tin can, and that's your light. And so when it's dark, there's not a whole lot to do outside of eating your spoonful of peanuts and lettuce that you were able to eat for dinner and go to bed. So I'm getting used to this bedtime routine, and I remember starting to get a little discouraged. And so I'm brushing my teeth in the dark, and there's no running water. So I got a cup of water from the well that you cannot see through. It's very dirty. I'm brushing my teeth, and it's grindy. And I'm thinking, what is in this water? And I put the toothbrush up to the candlelight, and it's filled with these itty bitty ants. And these ants are in my mouth, and I am going, oh my goodness, I cannot believe this is happening. Where am I? And so I go from there. I try and take a bucket bath. They don't have running water. I don't know how to do it. I'm all itchy because I don't know how to rinse soap off. I'm thinking, I just want to go to bed. So I get my itchy body, my grindy mouth that I haven't overcome the shock of it yet, and I'm trying to get in my bed that has a mosquito net over it, which I don't know how to use. And so I'm getting tangled up in this mosquito net, and the enemy was just plaguing my mind. This is day one, and I'm there for 3 months.
It's not like you're going to be able to get on a plane and just hop back to Pennsylvania, right?
Exactly. And so I'm tangled up in this mosquito net. I finally get situated with the help of somebody else there, and the enemy is going, you're no good, you're not worthy. All of those things that I believed when God first said, 10 years prior to that, this is what I want you to do. And I persevered in prayer, and I declared the word of God over my life, and I said, God said, this is his plan. And so, God, I'm going to choose to follow you. I'm going to choose to listen to your voice and stop believing these other lies. I prayed and prayed and prayed and got the breakthrough that night. And the rest of the time was amazing. So fast forward.
So before you get there, what did that teach you at that moment? That you were saying, I'm not worthy. I feel like I would like to get out of here. I made a big mistake, but you persevered in prayer. A lot of times we think about persevering just to physically do it, but you persevered in prayer. How did that change where you had been to where you would go?
Well, I look at prayer just like conversation.
Uh-huh.
So I'm talking to my Father, talking to my husband, Jesus, and as we're conversing, it's not enough to just say, I'm really struggling right now. Could you make this go away or make it all better? And then just leave it as that. You've been my supervisor for 10 years. You've seen me have different struggles here in the ministry. I don't just come to you and say, Barry, I'm really struggling right now in my role.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need your help, or I just need you to fix it for me. And then I leave your office. No, we process it. We talk through it.
It's a conversation.
It's a conversation. Right. I'm talking to you. You're listening. You're talking back. And that's how I look at prayer as well.
So what you're saying is God is a very tangible, real, right here, not somebody sitting on a throne that's saying, I'm going to call you to do this thing and good luck.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be with you,
yes.
and we can talk about this.
Absolutely.
And some people, will want to say, well, God should have never allowed it to get that way in the first place. Right. And so they blame God. So how can we talk to somebody who we're angry with?
Sure.
And so you got past that and said, okay, this is a mess. I'm brushing my teeth with ants, live ants. That wasn't the bedtime snack there, right?
Right.
Are you sure?
That was not.
Okay, wasn't the bedtime snack. So you got all this situation going, and God isn't a hope so with you. He's a no so. In other words, your knowledge, your knowing. Yeah, I think that's a huge difference here. And where I've been in my life is I had to learn that God is dependable, that He is somebody I can go to. Do I always go there? Do I always stay there? Am I always just perfectly walking in that? Nope, I'm not. I've had to learn when I get in that situation, that the real way to persevere is not just by duking it out in the flesh. And we lose a lot of sleep, and we, have to go to a lot of meetings and stand with somebody who wants to take their life and jump off a bridge and try to talk them off of it. But really the perseverance, as you learn, is in that talking with your Father.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, He doesn't want us to just barely survive.
Yeah.
He wants us to have the abundant life that He's came to give us. The second time I went to Mozambique, I was going in a totally different phase of my life. I was going to a different city, uncomfortable or unknown surroundings, I guess you should say.
And this is while you're working at the rescue mission, is that right?
This is while I was working at the rescue mission, and it was right at the time that the Lord had started just unfolding His vision for the Children's Palace. And the invitation came, really felt like it was God for me to go, but not only to go, but to take my son, who was 2 years old at the time.
It's a little crazy.
Not quite
a little crazy.
3, absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes we do crazy things,
Yes.
We're a little crazy, but if God told you to do it.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking in my mind, this is going to be glorious. Like it was when I was there as a young single individual, and I overcame and persevered, and it was a wonderful, glorious experience. So here I am in a new environment, kind of alone with my son, and it was hard. It was a very volatile time in the country at that time because of some political unrest. We were in a drought, so water supply was cut off. So we didn't have water to wash dishes with, wash hands with, wash bodies with, those things. We were able to have bottled water imported in, but you had to ration that because of the political unrest. They weren't sure if they were going to close the roads down and be able to get it in. So a lot of uncertainties.
And the air conditioning probably wasn't working so good.
Right.
Yeah.
No such thing. And over there, it's about 99% humidity. So 80 degrees feels like about 108. So it was rough. And I went through that period of time wondering, honestly, Lord, I don't understand. This isn't anything like I expected. This isn't anything like what I thought it was going to be, why I thought I was going, and what it was like last time. Right. And so I really wrestled the whole time we're over there. And overall, we were in Africa, my son and I, for 5 weeks at that stint. And when I came back and people were asking me, like yourself, like, what did God show you? I couldn't speak. It was almost like a shell shock because it had been such a surreal experience and difficult. And so it took a long time to process, God, what was the reason for that trip? And as I prayed and as I pressed into that, and as we move forward with developing the Children's Palace, God gave me a new empathy and understanding for the single parents that come through the doors of the rescue mission,
Mhm.
and really any other shelter for that matter. Because when they're coming in through our doors, they're a lot of times coming into a new environment
Mhm.
that is totally foreign to them.
Mhm.
This country, this city I was in Mozambique, it was totally foreign to me. And
So almost kind of like you intentionally went there, but you almost kind of end up almost homeless, as we would consider homelessness in America,
right,
with a child
right,
and nobody that you really knew,
right,
very foreign surroundings, and felt very isolated and alone.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we, like families that come into the rescue mission,
Mhm.
we had a roof over our head,
Mhm.
but it was a tiny room that had 2 beds in it, and that was about all. And we had food provided to us, but in order to get to the food, we had to figure out how to get to the dining area outside. My son, everything's dirt over there.
Mhm.
And so my son wouldn't walk in the dirt because it kept getting into his shoes.
Mhm.
And so I carried him for 5 weeks on my back in a capilana, which is the cloth that the Africa mamas carry their babies around in. And so I'm uncomfortable. He's uncomfortable. When folks come into a rescue mission, we know where the cafeteria is.
Right.
We know what the rules are.
Right.
We know what the rooms are. We know that they're safe. Well, everybody on the base there, I was surrounded by people,
Right.
but I didn't know them, and it was foreign to me. And so I had to learn my way in all of these different things. And the other thing was, for safety reasons, when I was there, and for safety reasons, when families come to rescue missions, that parent has to be with that kid, eyes on that kid 24/7.
And you couldn't leave your son, Zechariah,
Absolutely.
alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so for the first time, I experienced what it was like to never have a break from your child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that might sound like an awful thing to say. And I know that in the world of social media,
It's called reality.
yes, but in this world and social media, a lot of times, especially single moms, single parents, they forget that it's okay,
Mhm.
that parenting isn't glorious and fun all of the time. It's worth it. It's a gift. I truly believe it, but it is not always easy. And just because what we're seeing on social media is all of these amazing stories and pictures of how wonderful everybody's life is and how wonderful their family is, that's not reality.
Not reality.
Right?
That's correct.
That's the front that
Mhm.
we want to believe ourselves.
Right.
and we want
Facebook
people
helps
around to
to
believe us.
paint that whatever way you want it, or all that other stuff that's out there
Sure.
today. That you can make this look a
Sure.
certain way,
Sure.
but behind that lens,
Yes.
it's not that way.
Sure, exactly. So the reality is that when you are undergoing a situation that is new or uncertain, which if you're a parent, like every day, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Or if you're in a helping field, a social service organization, or a business or anywhere, kind of every day, you're learning new things. You're entering into a new situation or a challenge that you've never been in before and you don't know what to do. So for me, what I believe this trip was about was being able to relate more to individuals who are homeless, individuals who are in trauma, and especially the single parents that have to be with their kiddos all the time, have to be with their kiddos when they're trying to get a break, when they're trying to breathe, when they're trying to figure out, how am I going to get a job? How am I going to get food?
Correct.
How am I going to keep
And we
myself
didn't
alive?
have those services in place here at the rescue mission until
what was that
after.
like?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, until after you went to Africa,
Oh, right.
and you came back with that. We did not have the kind of things we didn't have a children's palace.
Right.
You know, and so your experience over there, and again, I go back to that day that I said, "What'd you learn?" And there's this blank stare on your face, you know, and it lasted that way for some time.
Sure.
Sometimes God will put us in these situations
Yes.
that are extremely uncomfortable, and we're wanting an answer right now. God, what is this about? When are you going to take care of this? When can I get out of this situation? And then after we persevere
Yes.
through it, and you did, through prayer and through just sticking it out, you came back and still didn't know why.
Right.
Until later,
And it was quite some time.
quite some time
Before
later.
that,
And then
I
we
was
sat down
real.
and you came, I remember that day you came to me and said, I think we're supposed to build a children's center a children's palace. And of course, that's another story that we don't have time for today of how I said, no, we're not. And here we are today in this amazing children's palace where this podcast is actually filmed out of, with some amazing families and children who are getting blessed. But it started because God sent you to a place that was uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
You persevered with God in the midst of that. You came out of that still not knowing what it was, but you said, God, I'm still going to trust you
Yes.
to be able to reveal to me the why
Yeah.
and the what going forward.
And when it was time for me to know, he revealed it.
Yeah.
When you were experiencing that day in the kitchen, and all of the other days of crisis, most of the stories in this book have to do with darkness.
They do.
Right? Have
They
to
do.
do with challenges
Very big
and
challenges.
uncertainty.
Yeah. Maybe small in comparison to some other challenges people face, but in my situation,
Absolutely.
they were dark for me.
It was
Just
huge.
like everybody who's watching this or listening to this
Yep.
right now, your own personal situation that you're facing right now is as dark as anything that anybody has ever faced, because it's your situation, and nobody can discount that.
Absolutely. Dark is dark.
Dark is dark.
You can't say that one type of darkness is darker than another.
No,
Dark
you
is
can't.
dark, but light is light.
That's right.
And when it's time, that light comes if we're willing to persevere, if we're willing to keep moving forward. You had no idea 33 years ago,
Nope.
as you're persevering in these little things and in these big things, you had no idea that God was writing a story.
Mhm.
God was writing a book from your experiences. There's little things in here about small testimonies, small challenges, but the way that the light came into those
Mhm.
have been woven together to create this beautiful masterpiece. And that's what it's like in all of our lives. And nothing is insignificant. You don't have to be in ministry. You don't have to be
That's right.
in a social service field. You don't have to be working with homeless people. You don't have to be doing some great ministry or missionary endeavor to encounter darkness and to experience light, or to have challenges and be able to move forward in what God has for your life. Everybody has a purpose, and everybody's purpose is unique.
That's right.
If the person who was called to run a business, or be a chef, or serve food, or run the vacuum cleaner, if those folks said no, just like I'm not worthy of serving amongst individuals who are broken.
That's right.
If they would say, no, I'm not worthy to run this vacuum cleaner, to clean this home, to serve this food, where would we be as a society and as a world?
Exactly right.
Like, nobody is elevated over the other. God sees us all the same, and God sees the darkness as the same, but he also sees the light as the same.
Absolutely.
And that's why it doesn't matter how big or small the challenge might seem to us or to others. If it's significant to us, it's significant to God, and he can come in and he can bring that light, and he can bring that understanding and use it to do something that is so far above and beyond what we thought would ever be possible.
Absolutely. Jessica, thank you for sharing that. You are going through something today, and if you're not going through something today, you will be soon, because that's the way this life is. I know a number of my friends today that are facing some serious issues in their life. And I know how you're struggling, and I know that you're hanging on to God. Well, don't quit hanging on to God. He's got a plan. He's got something so amazing for you. You may not understand nor like what you're going through today, but know this, that God will never leave you or forsake you. And as Jessica said, as she was in that situation in Africa, she got with her real father. Her father, who is a heavenly father, who is a father with answers, who really does want to have conversation with us. He doesn't want to just leave us in Africa, in a desert. He doesn't want to leave me 33 years ago with nothing to feed people because it's raining from a leaky roof and we have to use umbrellas. But he uses these experiences to do some amazing things in our lives. So I encourage you today to hang on to the hope that there is, that in spite of the darkness that you're going through, that there is light. And if we will say, God, show us that light, show us the way, show us how we can persevere through this with your help, Know that God will never leave you or forsake you, and He will take you to places you never dreamed. Thank you for joining us for this episode of In Darkness a Light Still Shines. May God bless you richly, and may you continue to persevere, knowing He is with you always.
Lord, I submit to you and to the process before me. Rather than focusing on my circumstances, help me to focus on the change that you are desiring to do within me as I persevere. Thank you for the hope that awaits me in the end. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for joining us. Our goal is to inspire, inform, and equip you to engage in the community around you. Join us next week for another episode of In Darkness, a Light Still Shines.